Age movies are kinda difficult to talk about. These movies are considered just as timeless as the Golden Age, and many people in my comments section specifically think they're even better. As someone who came into this watchathon with zero nostalgia for almost every movie, I disagree with that, but I thought it'd be a good idea to bring someone who has a lot of nostalgia to help me review these films today. Meet Gavin Likes Movies.
Hi, you guys. I'm Gavin Likes Movies. I talk about movies, and I run the channel Gavin Likes Movies. I'm part of the critic community. Who knows when that podcast is going to start, but I have a lot of nostalgia for these films. Let's just hop right into it.
Some of these films are real bad, like I expected, but there were some diamonds in the rough. Gavin and I had pretty similar lists, but there were a couple of differences, so we just averaged out our list and came up with one. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Even though a lot of these films surprised me in good ways, there was definitely no shortage of movies that I hated. Alice in Wonderland was such a shockingly embarrassing film that it easily took my last place today. I know a lot of people genuinely consider this to be the strongest of the Silver Age, but for me it dropped the ball with its embarrassing characters, nonsensical story, and absurd basic designs.
I had it at number 7. I had it a little bit higher than you, but I still do like this movie. I don't hate any of these films. I don't think any of them are particularly bad in really any sense. But I did think that really the animation and the world building did really hold the film, honestly. I thought there was some fantastic animations with world building. The Queen of Hearts, honestly, she was just a really good villain. But compared to the other villains that we've had Cruella de Vil, we've had Maleficent, we've had Captain Hook, but we've had so many iconic villains in the Silver Age. This villain's just kind of forgettable in the mix. Like, it's just kind of one we don't really remember all that much. Like, some of the characters were annoying, like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I do think it's a really good movie, though, but there are definitely some issues, unfortunately.
I more or less agree with that. I didn't think that there were many characters that I particularly liked, other than the Queen of Hearts. And I think that the designs are okay, but like the colors felt very weird for me. They were very, very dystopian and futuristic and bright. It did not fit at all with the tone that the movie was going for. And I personally hate Alice. She is one of the dumbest lead characters I have ever seen in any movie. And I know people are going to hate me for that, but man, was she an airhead.
The thing is, she feels kind of like Wendy. Like, she feels like a worse version of Wendy, where Wendy was sort of more of an independent type character. But in this movie, she just tries to be like Wendy, and she's not really like Wendy.
Every side character was bad, but I really did not like the Mad Hatter that much. I know Gavin is going to be very upset at me for saying that. He just did not work for me. I think that the movie is definitely creative. It's just in all the wrong ways for me.
Our number 7 was Lady and the Tramp, which I had in last place. Now, this is a movie overall that is just kind of interesting to talk about because it had a remake on Disney Plus, and I think it's one of the other ones I had a remake. I guess it's not too interesting to talk about. This is the one I was least interested in rewatching just because I've never liked it that much as a kid, and I still don't like it very much now. The third act is very mediocre, and I mean very mediocre. Like, the whole thing about a rat with a baby coming in is just a weird place to take this type of movie. It doesn't feel like it has a plot throughout most of the film. It just feels like it's loosely tying into plot points. Like, in the first act, there's like something going on. In the second act, there's something going on. And then there's the third act thing that we've never built it up to at all, and just randomly happens. Some of the characters are charming. There's some really good animation. The score, I guess, is pretty good, but all the Silver Age movies have a good score. Overall, it's just a forgettable one, and the remake is even worse.
For me, this was a fine 5 on 10. I pretty much agree with everything Gavin said. I think that the main duo is very, very charming, and I actually put this pretty high on the list at number 5. The second and third act is really, 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 really bad. But the first act, with the charming characters, was actually pretty engaging. I really like Lady and Tramp and their contrast. The contrast that they present is actually really interesting. Tramp is a rule breaker who lives his own life, but Lady, it always follows the rules, and she lives the pampered life. It was kind of like Toy Story in that regard, choosing between two different lives in the same species. It wasn't a waste of time, but there's definitely better from this era. Out of all the movies on this list, this was the one I found the most disappointing. I personally thought that the first half hour of 101 Dalmatians was actually fantastic. This movie had the potential to be number 2 on the list. Pongo and his owner are fantastic together, and I love that the movie comes from the perspective of him rather than a third-party narrator. Honestly, these four characters are fantastic.
So honestly, this is one that I didn't have too much expectation for. I think that for the most part, Cruella de Vil does carry this movie because, like, come on, she's awesome, and the whole song it just gets stuck in your head. Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil. In my opinion, it is one of the most memorable Disney villain songs without the villain actually even singing it. I thought the animation at times was nice, I guess is the best way to put it. It's a really good film overall, but I think Cruella de Vil is the reason why it's so awesome.
One of my favorite scenes in any Silver Age movie, with one exception, is when Pongo's owner is really talking about Cruella and playing all of the different instruments of her theme song. Man, that was such a great song. I really think that there should have been more to this film. I think the first half hour sets up everything really nicely, kind of like Cars 3. But for me, it just dropped the ball by really not utilizing these characters in the second and third act.
So our next one was Sword in the Stone. Honestly, I think this one's quite underrated. It is really only at my number 5, but I think that a lot of people really just put it dead last, and I really don't understand why. I think that overall, just the world building at times can be really good and interesting. I think, of course, we have Merlin, who's, in my opinion, a really good character, kind of teaching Arthur some stuff. And sure, you can kind of complain about the fact that I didn't really teach him too much, but the whole scene where he grabs the stone out of the stone, in my opinion, is one of the greatest scenes in Disney history for me personally. Just the animation, that scene just looks absolutely gorgeous, and just the way the scene plays out. I get it, the villain wasn't as great as some of the other Silver Age villains that we have had in the past, but overall I think just there's some really nice stuff that it does work really well. The whole background animation looks really great and really nice.
One of the reasons I was kind of dreading this era was because of movies like this, but thankfully Sword in the Stone actually surprised me in a couple ways. I thought that the wizard battle was really creative, and I liked that it wasn't just dragon versus dragon. It was outsmarting them, and you can really see how Merlin, even though he plays really small animals, he outsmarts her. I thought that was a really creative scene. And then I agree with Gavin that there definitely are some problems. The villain is not that memorable. I thought that it was basically a plotless movie, and I thought that one of the subplots with the squirrels was very embarrassing. It's kind of a mess of a film, but I definitely don't hate it. Alright, finally some actual good stuff for me. Cinderella the 1950 classic is shockingly good. This is yet another movie I found bad as a kid, but man oh man was I wrong. I mean, sure, the mice can be pretty annoying sometimes, and Cinderella makes some pretty weird decisions, like trusting the evil stepmother would bring her to the ball. Like, that's an Alice move, okay? Despite these flaws, there are some incredible scenes too. Even if the mice are occasionally pretty annoying, their struggles feel real and helpful. My favorite part of the movie is when the mice are trying to find things to make Cinderella's dress, because we follow their plights where they risk life and limb just to make it for her, and then the stepsisters destroy it for no reason. Man, oh man, was that a good emotional beat.
Overall, this is a film that I do have quite a good bit of nostalgia for. When we were like looking over these movies, I actually forgot this one. I'm kind of shocked that I did, honestly. I don't think it deserves a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, but overall, I think it did work. For me, it's a 6 out of 8 of these movies, but I love I at least like all of these films. So it's definitely hard to really put it this low. Like, it was really hard for me. But overall, I thought that the mice were very fun to watch. Gus was a scene stealer. Come on, he's awesome. Lucifer, of course, was definitely fun to watch as well. Honestly, the thing is that the side characters are more fun to watch than the actual main characters that we're following in this movie.
I disagree strongly!
I did enjoy the fairy godmother. Like, the stepsisters are wicked and evil, and you just hate them. You hate them so much. And then you have the stepmother, who's even worse than the two. She's evil as well. But my main issue with this film, and I'll always have that issue with this movie, is that it feels like it's building up to something mean at all to just happen to the stepsisters. Maybe they had to lose their house or something, or just any little payoff would have worked, but they didn't really. It just felt like they were building up to something, and then they just don't. So that is really my main issue with it. Definitely does deserve some of the praise it gets, even though I think a 97 is a bit too much. My number two was The Jungle Book. Honestly, this is definitely a great movie, honestly. The Bare Necessities is one of the most iconic songs in this era. I think that just I love the character. Shere Khan is such a great character, and like it feels like he deserves a Disney villain song, and I really wish he did get a villain song. Sure, at times the characters don't really animate well because this is kind of the era where Disney was using massive lines, like just like big black lines for their characters. But the way the jungle looks is really great. I think that just is these great characters, and it just builds this fairy tale that at the same time feels real because we're following this real boy, and it works so well.
Sure, this movie kind of felt like filler at times, but honestly, it's the best kind of filler. It felt like the best version of Alice in Wonderland because we're following one character and we're seeing the journeys he has with the other characters who are really fleshed out with each of their personalities. What's Baloo like? Listen to his song. What's the snake like? Listen to his song. What's Shere Khan like? Listen to it. Oh, he doesn't have a song. But besides not having a song, Shere Khan is a great antagonist. Easily one of my favorites up there with Jafar and Ursula. He's like a better version of Scar. Cooning, manipulative, but also more intimidating, since he's foreshadowed throughout the entire movie, which is the one shred of consistency that holds this movie together. I'm just glad this ended up being a fun jungle movie instead of another bottom-tier film. Sleeping Beauty is a magical experience that I grew up with my whole life, but honestly, I haven't seen this movie in half a decade, and I was worried I would ruin my own childhood, since I know I've ruined everyone's childhood with this video. Fortunately, the movie is so fantastic, I didn't have to ruin it. The entire movie is one magical ride, from the fairy tale opening to the return to the castle, to the infamous pricking your finger scene, and my god, is it amazing. The use of green to represent Maleficent's malice return, and the incredible score make it one of my favorite Disney scenes. The score in general is masterful, each encompassing a different region of this world, like the cottage's plains, or the castle, or Maleficent. Each piece of music is distinct. The fairies were really charming and fun, but the real appeal of this movie is the third act.
This is one I put at like number 7. Like I put at like the bottom of my list because I just thought it was decent at best. I thought the only thing that was really redeemable about it was the fairies. But on this most recent rewatch, this film is really great. I think that Maleficent is so wicked and evil with the schemes that she does. When I think of evil, I think of Maleficent. She's just so sinister in everything that she does, and just that whole prick your finger scene that Critic was talking about is a great scene, of course, one of the greatest scenes in Disney history. And of course, you have the fairies who are scene stealers as well, and I really enjoyed all 3 of their characters. The prince at times was a little charming. He is one of my issues though, because like he wasn't really that good, particularly at all. Debatably, the best animation out of all of it. It's either this one or Peter Pan for me. We'll talk about that movie when we get to it. But it's just the animation is gorgeous. The score is fantastic. Honestly, it's probably the best score out of all of these movies. I was not a fan of the prince or the princess. They were just kind of bland to me. Some of the other characters that we have, like the king, and just some side characters were just really bland and boring, especially as our main character, the prince. But overall, it felt like we were more following the fairies.
If you haven't seen this movie, please go watch it, and then you'll see why it's my favorite of the Silver Age by quite a bit. Peter Pan is definitely taking this number 1 spot. I love the characters and I love the adventure they go on, but Gavin is the one who has this in his top 3 movies of all time, so I'm gonna let him have this one. Gavin?
But it still is a fantastic film. It's probably the one out of these I easily have the most nostalgia for. Peter can't really grow up, and he doesn't really grow throughout the film because he can't, because he's in Neverland where people cannot grow up and mature. And I thought that Hook is a fantastic villain. He's awesome in every scene he's in. He's just so quotable with all the lines that he has, and just the voice acting by him is just stunningly good. And then we have characters like Smee, who were just so great. All the characters for me personally were all memorable. They all had their own little scenes that they were in. Even Tiger Lily has this little memorable moment. All of these characters are great in their own ways. Now, there's the Indian stuff that a lot of people do like to complain about, which I see why. It doesn't bother me too much. Like, I get the song is quite racist, even though it is quite catchy at the same time. But it doesn't really bother me as much because everything surrounding it is just fantastic.
So that's our list. Feel free to disagree with us in the comments below. And next we are doing the Bronze Age, which is a pretty weird age for Disney movies. I mean, this era had some real forgettable stuff. It also had some classics, so it's a lot like this era. Let's see what I think about it in 3 weeks to a month. I don't know. I don't have a consistent schedule. Okay, sue me.